Hello, and go ahead.
Ah, I'm sorry. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the virtual with the sixth annual African American Film Series panel discussion about the film Banker. I can't believe that this is the fourth and final film and panel discussion this year. There was so much that was happening with COVID, and I mean, it still is continuing. However, we were reached out, by people last year asking, is the African American Film Series going to happen? And we said, we can't be anywhere publicly, but we're going to try to see what we could do as a team to still bring this great event to you, that was still high quality, right? We don't want to bring you something shabby, but something that was, high quality, put together a great panel and see how we can be adaptive. And with a name like Communities First, we have to do things to find out how to put you first. And that's why this film is happening. And the first film that we had about, I think it was Willie O'Ray, one of the first African American hockey players, Fast Colors, Black Magic, women superheroes. I mean, we've had some great films throughout this season. And I mean, Essence, is there anything you want to say, just, opening before I talk about the sponsors a little bit, just some of the films and just some of your feedback?
I'll just say that it's been a tremendous amount of fun, and lots of interesting and challenging topics have come up. So if anybody has not seen those other discussions, you can find those on our YouTube channel, and you can also find those on Facebook. So just lots of information, lots of things to make you think, lots of things to challenge you as a person, trying to navigate our way through this world.
Thanks so much, Essence. So this event is all about inspiring, informing, and educating you, and also leaving you empowered. And the only way we can do that is making sure that we're listening to what your needs are, and then making sure that our program meets what the needs of the community, to meet the needs of the community each and every day. So I want to start off, I guess before we get really going in the panel, I want to thank our sponsors for being adaptive and moving with us to take this to an online platform. And so I want to give a special thanks to Mott Community College, the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, Truth, Race, Healing, Transformation Initiative, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, the Greater Flint's Out Council, NBC 25 for being a media sponsor, and the Flint Institute of Arts as well for helping us with our online digital series. I also want to remind you that we have other things that's going to be coming up throughout the season. So even though this film series is ending right now, we're still going to be bringing Movies Under the Stars and other things to you throughout the year. I know Renee has been working on, and the team, a great series with community candor and some more financial series and civic engagement. And so please, follow us on your social media platforms, find out where all our information and content will be, which is on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of those, even our website, and share it. So before we get rolling, please take a second, share this link with all the people in your network to let them know that the information that you're about to get and this discussion about this powerful movie Banker is about to be dope. So Essence, I'm gonna turn it over to dope moderator. So Essence, go right ahead and take it away.
It's a lot to live up to. I will do my best. All right. So the
You
banker.
can do it.
The Banker is a really interesting film, and it's about two Black businessmen in the 50s and the 60s who bought up commercial and residential properties, and they owned at their height more than 177 buildings, including major downtown parcels, right? And it was at a time when it was, whether spoken or unspoken, somewhat illegal for them to do so in some of the ways that they went about things. But they helped to break LA's real estate color line, and to desegregate the city, right? But they ran into some trouble. And so we're going to start our conversation talking about how we all got interested in the industries that we are currently in. And I want you to introduce yourselves and then talk about how you got started in the world of banking, business, planning, or real estate. And we will start with Brandy.
Well, first, thank you both for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. So just to back up, my name is Brandy Cook Brown, Executive Director for 100K Ideas, a Flint-based nonprofit designed to help people, specifically aspiring entrepreneurs and innovators, take their ideas to market. We understand ideas are important, and access to being able to pursue ideas is also incredibly important. And so for me, landing in this space was kind of by accident. I happened to meet the person who was creating this organization, and kind of conversations led to that space. But I've always had a passion for helping people. So even when I was younger and trying to navigate who I was going to be and what career I wanted to follow, the consistent thing has always been I want to help people, and I've done that in a couple different ways throughout my career journey. And this is one of the more satisfying ones, because it's a direct outreach to some person and you can see them make that progress and see their goals going. And also be in a space and learning how economic development and entrepreneurship is so crucial to specifically Black people and achieving wealth goals, that it's created a whole new space for me that I didn't know existed and needed it. And so my passions are now aligning a little bit more, and broadening and becoming more specific outside of just simply helping people, but how do we create real movement towards development among us?
That's awesome to hear. And I think we all have a journey, right? And sometimes we land in places accidentally, but I would say overall they're on purpose and they're intentional, and we thrive when we allow life to happen and we navigate those different spaces. Jason, give us an introduction, and how did you end up in the banking world?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Essence, and thank you Communities First, for having me on this panel. Like Essence said, my name is Jason Pauleteer. I am Market Manager of Community and Economic Development at Fifth Third Bank. And what we do is we provide products and services that the bank has to offer, and we make those available to all the communities which we serve across our 10 state footprint. And for me, it was also kind of by accident that I got into banking. It's not been by accident that I've stayed in it for some number of years. But
technical difficulties, sorry.
Right, exactly. So when I was in my final years of college, I had a couple of friends who actually worked in banking as bank tellers. While I was, as they say, slanging boxes at UPS. And the way that they went to work dressed versus the way that I went to work dressed were drastically different. I said, I think I like the way that they go to work dressed. I want to see what they got going on. And so I ended up applying for and getting a part-time job at a bank as a teller at MBD Bank, as a matter of fact, back in the day. And shall I say the rest is history. I've kind of progressed through the bank throughout my career, being a branch manager, small business lender, commercial real estate lender, community development lender, and now I manage community development across several states. And so, like I said, it was an accident to get in, but it was certainly not an accident that has kept me. And I've really kind of dedicated my life to now really introducing this idea of economic development and personal financial well-being to folks as kind of my banner cause, if you will.
And I've had an opportunity to get to know Jason over probably the last, 7 or 8 years. And I'll say you've done a lot of good work through, through your place of employment. So thank you for all that you do. Renee.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. Renee Kent, Director of Special Programs for Communities First. And I would call myself, I guess, a recovering banker because I spent 18 years in banking, ending my career in banking as a community development banker. And my story isn't that different than what you've heard. I definitely fell into banking by accident. I would say by accident with purpose, because when I had to pick a major in college, I picked my major in accounting solely based on the fact that I wanted a job where I could wear a suit, right? In business. I had no idea what that meant. And I had no idea what a career in banking meant. My only experience with a bank was going to cash a check. I had no idea what happened behind the scenes. And so I landed in banking after college. Didn't particularly enjoy it until I found out about community banking, and the rest is history.
Well, we're glad that you're in recovery. Hope that you stay there because we definitely enjoy having you on the team. So we appreciate your background and your history, and for all that you contribute to our organization.
Yeah, and if you ever need medication to make sure you don't go back to banking, just let us know. We'll try to create something.
They have a vaccine for that.
Right.
All right, Jermaine, give us a little bit of your background and history.
Yeah, sure. Estes and Glenn, first, thank you for having me on this panel. Communities First does great work, and I'm just glad to be on this panel to be a part of some of that work that you're doing in communities. And I'm also grateful for the fact that Jason is on this panel, and people can see that we're not the same person. I know I get called Jason occasionally in the city of Detroit because he's such a great guy. And so I appreciate being here. So folks know Jermaine Ruffin is a real person. So thank you for that opportunity. So, my role currently is as the Associate Director of Equitable Planning and Legislative Affairs at the City of Detroit. And my background is in community development and urban planning. And so for me, how I got my start is I grew up. A lot of stories start like this for a lot of rappers, but not for urban planners. So I'm gonna share it anyway. I grew up in the hood, in the projects on the south side of Canton, Ohio. And I always wondered, growing up, like, how did this kind of disinvestment happen? I didn't have the words for it, but why did I have to navigate my neighborhood in a particular kind of way? Why did, the police come over here so much? Why did the crime happen here? And I always wondered why that was. And so as I got older and I got to college, I started looking up, different majors and understanding things. And urban planning was one of those things that I came to because it allowed me the ability to kind of see how systems worked. Systems worked against us as a community, and how systems could work in a positive way if we had more folks who look like us in this profession. And so I'm glad to be a part of this discussion because this movie, it definitely was inspiring. It was frustrating. It was but all of these things are very real. So I'm glad to be here to discuss it with you all today.
All right, awesome. So we'll start with just kind of that opening, the opening scene of the film where Bernard was trying to gain some information. He was trying to learn how they make money, right? So he was trying to learn how white people make money. And so I would just ask, the question, how can people of color make money, right? But then also couple that with the threat back then was anything and everything up to death, right? For some of the things that Bernard was trying to find out. And so what are some of the current threats to making too much and knowing too much right now? We can start with, we'll start with Jermaine.
One, I think the opening scene to the movie where he's a child, Bernard's a child, and he's listening in and he wants to understand all this information, was one for me. It was it reminded me of myself. When you're growing up in Black households, you don't really get in grown folks' business like that, right? And so it resonated with me in that way because that curiosity as a kid also kind of moved into this curiosity as an adult of where information was. I wanted to be there to get that information, to empower myself and to empower those around me. And so being able to see that, it definitely resonated with me. As far as the question that you asked, which is what are some of the things that, kind of put folks in danger? I think the biggest part right now in our community is the sharing of information, right? I think some folks don't realize that the power is in sharing the information to empower those around you. we often figure we want to be, experts, and we want to maintain that expertise so it doesn't, so we have our lane. But at the end of the day, the success and the empowerment comes from sharing that information with those who are like-minded, and then you can move together in that way. And so I think that's one of the things that I would highlight is something I love to see change.
I think you said something really, really important, and we see it play out every single day, that people have information and they don't share it with other people. And being the token person in the room that is representative of a culture or a people group is not the way that things need to be. If we're really talking about equity, we're not talking about having to continually say, I'm the first person to do this, or I'm the first person. It's like, no, we need to get past that. And, there's 20 folks that are doing the same thing that I'm doing or that you're doing. And so I think there's the opportunity, to do that. But I wonder if even the people that are watching right now have shared the fact that they're watching this conversation with the folks that are, on their social media, right? That's a really simple, easy first step to doing that. So Glenn, I'll ask you the same question. How can people make money? Like, what are some of the things that people need to do in order to be in that space to make more than what they're making now? And then maybe what are some of the current threats are there any threats to knowing too much or making too much money?
Oh man, Jermaine started smiling when you started asking me this question, so he knows how I feel about this as well. But I mean, as far as like money, what can you do to make money, right? I mean, there's multiple things that you can do to make money, right? But it's also making sure that you're finding what you're passionate about, what you're going to be an expert in, right? To really hone in the skill where you're not trying to be like a jack of all trades and a master of nothing, right? Sometimes like the concentration on something. I'm not saying you can't have multiple streams of income because that's always a good thing, but you can make money working for a company, right? Like everybody is not an entrepreneur, and I'm not, right? Jason raised his hand, right? Like you, and we had this conversation the other day. We know people that are, presidents of certain companies or other vice presidents that make, $800,000, $1 million to $20 million, working for certain companies because they have a certain skill set, right? But you can make money also having a product. It's all about finding a problem and then putting a solution to it. And then when you put a solution to it, and then it's about how you actually say, what makes me different from my competitor, right? It's finding a problem, solving it with whatever your solution is, and then the way that you lay it out, the way that you market it and advertise it, and the quality of it. Like those are some of the things, if you can figure those out, like you're on your way. And then sometimes you'll find out, which I think that's what Brandy and them was around for at 100K, but you think you got the brightest idea and it was done, 20 years ago. And you walk in and you're like, oh, this is the dopest idea ever. And then you walk in and find out, dang, that was already thought of 30 years ago and somebody been making money and it's actually not that good of a business. But hey, great try. I think the other thing about entrepreneurship is knowing, is being okay with things not succeeding, right? I've started a lot of companies. And when I say a lot, I mean several, right? A few of them went very well, and then a couple of them went bad, right? Like some of them didn't go as good. I think the other thing about entrepreneurship is knowing what goes good and what can go bad and understanding those consequences, but you will never know unless you try. When Esther was talking about roadblocks, excuse me, when she mentioned that question, what type of roadblocks will you see? And is it dangerous to make too much money? I'll tell you this, with more success comes more envy. With more success comes more of a bigger X, on your back, right? Because people start paying attention to you. I remember once upon a time, I used to be under the radar quite well. And, now I can't hide, right? And I be trying to hide, what I mean, in certain aspects, but you can't hide. So the more you do, the more people pay attention. And not saying that it's always a bad thing. It's just when they say where much is given, much is required. So people put an extra level of responsibility on your shoulder when you're doing more, or they feel, and then it's the other aspect of, especially being a minority, is people think you could have too much, right? It's like people start having this feeling of like, do you have too much? You need to share, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And it's like, you're still trying to get on your feet and you're still trying to do things. So I also think about perceptions and reality. right? So sometimes people perceive things to be one way, and in reality, they're a different way. And it's how do we get past that idea that people should only be limited because of what somebody else, the limitations that other people put on them.
And so what I can appreciate about what both of you said is you didn't say get into this business or like this is the quick get rich quick scheme, right? There are just some foundational principles and life lessons that have been learned, right? That help us to succeed in business. And I think the more that we can share those things, the less it becomes about selling eyelashes and Tupperware, right? And it becomes more about doing good business, doing it the right way, building relationships, getting to know people, and being an expert at the thing that you need to be an expert at to succeed. So Glenn talked a little bit about products and services and entrepreneurship. And I will just say that he probably was talking about me, as I remember this idea I came up with when I was raking leaves. And I'm like, man, it's so hard to get those leaves into that brown paper bag. Why is there not a leaf funnel? Right. So I'm drawing. My background is engineering. So here I am drawing it up. I got a whole sketch and diagram. I'm procuring materials. And then I realized maybe I should Google this. And there's like 400 different varieties of this thing. So I just literally went over to Home Depot and bought one. But it was a salty moment for me because I thought I had solved the world's problems with that. So I'll ask Brandy, when you're talking with businesses, what is some of the advice that you give them as people are embarking upon entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so the first thing is just the fact that, walking in the door and telling someone your idea is a huge step. Like that's not something everyone is comfortable with. It takes risk and, some bravery to really put it out there. This is something, and kind of what Glenn was saying, we have talked to people that have held ideas in their within themselves for 20 years. Like, no, like on average, we talk to people, it's 5 to 10 years. Like that's what we're seeing. Cause you just, it's a big step to kind of really, let yourself have that. So we try to be encouraging when we talk to them and let them know, like, we know coming in the door, well, virtually talking in the meeting right now, is not easy. And so we want to give them some props for that, but then also letting them don't get discouraged by what we find. So, when you go through our process, one of the first things we do is Google, because so many people don't do what Essence did. So they don't go online because that makes it real. Because if it does exist, now it's real. Now it may not be a possibility for you. And so one of our tenets is not to tell people whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's more so, let's provide you the information you need to move forward. So yeah, say we do Google it with you and we happen to find it. It's still your decision if you want to move forward with this or not. Maybe there's something you can do to make it, a cheaper way to produce it and make it more, efficient based on what you understand the product to be. Like there are ways to change things to make it work better for you. And then sometimes maybe it's time to let it go. And again, that's all their personal decision. But what we try to do is give them information to be empowered to make the right decision. And then if that is the idea that gets, pushed by the wayside, all right, so what's next? You don't have, this isn't the end all be all. If you are really serious about moving forward with your idea, or maybe you have a side hustle that you've been doing for years and you're ready to legitimize it and take a leap and let that be what you do in your life. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, let's go through it. And so it does take a lot of patience. I think people assume the turnaround time is quick. Hey, I'm committed to it. I quit my job. I'm ready to go. Okay, well, let's not do that. Let's take a second. Let's, give it some time because it takes exactly time out. Like you'd be surprised. But a lot of that is just like, it takes time to build this because even when you do a pilot sale, the results of that may also tell you this is not it. And it's being okay that the results may not turn out your way. So a lot of it is the patience. Like, just be patient with the process. It will happen, but you have to, work at it. It takes a lot of effort. It's not, people don't wake up and are in the same place that they are now, other entrepreneurs that they did just overnight. It takes work to build it. And so that's a huge piece. And then the other part is just listening to what their gaps are. So what we try to do is listen when we're talking to them and when they're talking to us the first time, like, well, what don't you know? And we don't ask it quite explicitly like that. We try to make it comfortable. So it's like a lot of people don't have bank accounts, which is an interesting facet for this movie that I'd love to get to that conversation later. But, people don't have, some people don't have some of those like basic things. And then you realize they actually don't know how to run a business. And so it kind of goes back to your point, Essence, and the fact that, it's not so much about the idea itself. Sometimes it really is just about, can you actually sustain this once it happens? Because just as many people fold after they've started it and got a contracts to go forward, that would mean financial stability, but they folded because they didn't know how to run a business. So again, there's a lot of that education, and I can talk for hours about all the things. But those are kind of really the tenets that we try to, lead with. So when they're on the journey, they understand it. Again, it takes time, it takes patience, and eventually it will pay off if you stick with it.
Yeah, I think those are great tips. That's great, great advice and great insight. I'm going to give Glenn a heads up. Brandy mentioned patience, and at some point I'm going to come back and ask you to talk about your 3 Ps to success, because I think those really do factor into to the film. And then if you happen to need a bank account, please inbox us or send us an email. We'll put the email address in the comments, and we will help get you connected to Jason Pauleteer so he can get you set up with a bank account. And that's actually one of the things that we're working with people this year on through our financial education work is getting people signed up if they don't have a safe place to keep their money, because if you put it under the mattress, the house could burn down. If you leave it with a friend, they could steal it. There are so many unfortunate things that can happen. So, putting your money in a bank is not an unsafe thing to do. So definitely something to think about, and we'll help you. So in the film, one of the main characters got laughed at for some of his ideas and dreams and hopes about real estate. And they tried to kill his dream before he even got started, right? So in your career, have you had either a goal, an aspiration, or an idea, and had somebody, laugh at it or try to kill it before you really even got going? And I'll go with Renee first on this one.
Of course. So I have maybe 2 comments about that. One thing that or a place that I found myself in banking was constantly pushing the envelope, trying to do things that hadn't been done before. And so it's not that they weren't right, people just weren't familiar with them. And so I did have to spend a lot of time pushing those ideas and convincing people that we should be doing this. And because my job was to impact the community, and I couldn't do that with the products that existed. And so I had to push new ideas and new products. And so I got told no a lot, but I didn't accept it. So I found that I turned no into not now or not yet, and always pushed for a when or a how. And so I did face that, a lot in my career. But I'll also say on the other side of that, I did talk to a lot of developers who were not ready yet or didn't have all the pieces in place yet. And so I was really careful not to say no to them and kill their dreams, if you will. I was really careful to try to give them advice and connect them with other resources. Because to Brandy's point, it does take a lot to, put your heart and soul out there, to put a vision together and try to make it come, to life. And so I never wanted to, kill anybody's dream, because I definitely knew what that felt like. But I also wanted to, create those expectations of what was needed in order for them to get to where they needed to go and who they needed to talk to and what they needed to think about. So I guess I can experience that on both sides of my career.
Can I add something to Renee's real quick? Essence real quick. And Renee definitely does not kill dreams, but she definitely will offer you constructive criticism. So I don't want you to think she won't give you the other. I was waiting on her to add that other piece to it, but
Yeah, I tell the truth, but in a
right.
nice way.
There you go. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
And I think that, that makes a lot of sense. You don't know whether or not something is going to work out for another person, right? And sometimes we can come into a situation with what our past experience has been, and we assume and think that it's not going to work out, right? So I think that that's a good approach, Renee. You tell people the truth. You can be honest. You can give them examples. And I think even with our work at Communities First, we learned from some of the community development organizations that didn't make it, right? As we were preparing to do the work that we were doing. So I guess with that, I'll ask Glenn if you can give us an example, because I know that you have many of where people try to kill the dream or.
Oh man, absolutely. I mean, I got one. I got one is a good friend of mine now that might be on this panel. Hey, but Jermaine,
I knew it was coming because I was going to dig it up too. Let's make it happen.
Right, he said, "Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen." No, Jermaine didn't kill my dream, but no, but I definitely meet a whole bunch of dream killers all the time. I mean, it's not because people underestimate you, right? And I think that's the other thing about the movie that I'll talk about is like the underestimation of people and individuals, their skills, gifts, and abilities. Because it's just something that they haven't seen before. They think it's impossible to do, like what Renee talked about earlier. I could think about, when we first were starting Communities First. This was at the time of like the economic downturn. You see what I'm saying? When houses was going in foreclosure, nobody was building. And I was like, there's an opportunity here. And at first, thinking about doing it as a for-profit developer or a nonprofit, it really was deciding, was like, okay, we really should do this as a nonprofit because this needs to be something that's dedicated to actually helping people, not something that helps me meet my bottom line as an individual, right? And to see the amount of people at the beginning, like, I mean, I still have people now, but there were some people at the beginning like, I don't know why you're starting this, where other nonprofits or community development organizations are closing, people are losing homes, they're foreclosing, why are you doing this? And I was like, oh, I'm learning from everything that these people, all these other organizations have done over the last 10 to 15 years and structuring the organization just like I would structure a business, right? I would look for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But even just with Oak School, people told that our first development out the gate is like, it's no way that you're going to do a $5 million project, out the gate. Like, that's just impossible. That's never been heard of. That's not what people do. You don't have all these different things in place. And sometimes you find out that people just assume you don't have things in place just because they talked to somebody before you that didn't have something in place. So like they'll carry that disbelief, right, from person to person. So what I try to do, and I think our organization, our team tries to do, is take everybody at face value for that meeting, right? Not try to compare them to somebody else that came in and sat down and talked to you and told you what their idea and dream was. And I think that's made me a lot more cautious to say, oh, this person reminds me of that person, and then automatically just write them off. So I try my hardest not to be a dream killer, but you're right, Essence. I mean, I got stories for days of people that just tell me constantly about, oh, I'm thinking about, doing this. And they're just like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Or, yeah, I don't know why you think you're going to do that. And then, these same people end up coming back later and end up either being supporters, later friends, allies. It's like, oh, I didn't think you were going to get that done. It's like, okay, I guess that's the other thing is nobody is, and I guess I could leave this just for more of an encouragement, is nobody's going to believe in your dream more than you, right? And nobody's going to put more work in your dream than you. So if you're not willing to put the time in to make your dream happen, nobody else is going to put that time in to help your dream happen. So you got to be the hardest worker on your dream.
Yeah, great points. And I can remember in the film, there was a man of Italian descent, and he became an ally. And he's like, hey, you have everything. You have the intelligence, you have the ability, you have the passion, you have the drive. And I know that you can do this, and I'll work a partnership with you. And he presented a fair partnership at that, which was unique. And said, hey, let's do this together. And it reminded me of when we were doing that Oak School project, and people were like looking at us like, who are you? Where did you come from? How are you going to do this? And somebody said that there was a file like this of other developers who had tried to do different projects at that same location and nobody could figure out how to make it work, right? And I remember somebody saying basically, well, they all tried. We'll give you a chance and see what you can do, right? It wasn't an endorsement. It wasn't a coming from a place of we think you can do it, but it was like, what's the harm in letting you try? Which I thought was sort of an interesting opportunity, and we took full advantage of it and made great things happen with that development. So now I want to shift to asking, and whoever would like to go first, either Jermaine or Jason, just tell us how the discriminatory practices that we saw in the film related to real estate and banking have harmed communities of color.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, I have something to say about everything that you got, that every question that you've asked so far. Starting with, how can people of color make money? The same way everybody else makes money. It ain't the 1950s no more, y'all. Get out of that thinking, right? We can make money just the same way everybody else can. Probably our number one dream killer is ourselves, right? So we got to get out of our own way and get after it, right? And one of the things that I really appreciated about the film and how I think his name was Barker, how Barker partnered with Bernard was Bernard knew that he had this dream, he knew that he had this skill set, and he had the tenacity to go after it, right? And regardless of what everybody around him said, beginning with his father when he was a young child, to her uncle when they got to the crib, he was like, okay, I can show you better than I can tell you. Right. And so I would say I would encourage us all to get out of our own way and get after whatever it is that we want to do, get after it. Right. Some of the pervasive things, discriminatory practices from that period in time were around this idea that Blacks were not here for the American dream. Right. There was a whole segment of the population that didn't think that we were qualified to own homes or run businesses, right? And it created this thing that they called redlining, right? And if you look at the maps today of where people of color live, you still see the remnants of that practice from the 50s, 60s, 70s, so the Community Reinvestment Act, which is by design, one of the reasons why I have my job today, was really put in place to counteract that practice, right? The interesting thing, the interesting thing about that many people may not realize is that wasn't originally a banking practice. There was a governmental practice, right? The Office of Housing and Urban Development began with that practice, and the Federal Housing Association began with the practice of redlining. And it was just that was the way that business was done, and so obviously the financiers would catch on to it, and because of that, because it was so pervasive for so long, the effects of it remain today. But the ability to buy a home for Black people in particular is a lot easier today than it probably ever was, right? And it's really a language shift that we have to make in order to get there. What I liked about what Bernard did was he learned the language of business. He learned the language of financiers. He learned the business itself. And so he became an unstoppable force. If it wasn't for his business partner kind of lashing out on his own, launching out on his own, trying to do stuff on his own and not following the directives that they had laid out for him, I don't think they would have ever gotten in the trouble that they got into, because they were for all intents and purposes, they were doing everything by the book. So, so we're working to overcome some of the lingering effects of that. But again, we got to get out of our own way. We need to build our credit to a space where we can qualify for the loan, right? We need to get a job, right? I had a friend, going back to Brandy's point of, I quit my job and I want to start this business, right? I had a friend back in the day, and it's funny the things that stick with you, right? So when I was a teenager, actually I was in college, I wasn't a teenager. One of my friends said to me, he was an older gentleman, he said, "You mess around trying to get one more thing and give up your for sure thing and end up with no thing." And that has just stuck with me in so many facets, and I've been able to use that in so many facets of life. So, you got to be deliberate, educate yourself, surround yourself with the right people. Life is a team sport. Business is a team sport, and business is hard. It is hard, hard, hard. So if you ain't ready for that, if you ain't ready to almost work, ask Glenn, talk to Glenn in essence about the 24-hour-a-day work cycle that they had to put in starting Communities First, right? And then talk about whether or not you're really ready to start or launch a business, right? Been there, done that. I really prefer making money working for someone else because I have started and launched other businesses. It's just a lot of hard work, and I don't want to work that hard.
Right, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And that's okay. And I think that's sometimes what people fail to realize is it's okay to know your lane. Not saying you can't have other sources of income, but working for somebody, people make it seem like working for a team or working for a company, bringing your skill set to a table to accomplish a common goal, right, is something bad. Like that's how people have, taught. Like everybody needs to, get in their own bag. It's like, okay, all right, you talk about that now, but so. Essence, I'm just going to add this part, but you have some, and I just want people to make sure they think about this. And I understand financial freedom and the things that people say they want or time freedom. But I know some people right now that will make $30,000 working from themselves, but they can go work for a company and probably make 150,000. But they'll be like, I'm just because they want to put on the facade of, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not trying to tell you how, because you got your own thing that you have to do for yourself, but don't get caught up in the hype. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it takes to get you to your ultimate financial goal, right? That's what you have to do is to look at, in the time that it takes being at home. And I mean, you can balance those things out. But I just appreciate Jason for saying it. And I just wanted to just add that piece. It's like, it's nothing wrong working for people. Like it's nothing wrong with that.
And I'll just add that I heard Jason say he doesn't want to work that hard. So just in case his boss is listening, so it's a different kind of hard, right? When you are responsible for payroll, keeping the lights on, versus going to work and doing your job and doing it well. It's a whole different ballgame, different level of hard. And it's not saying that you can't do it. It's do you really want to do it that makes the difference. And so we'll go back to the previous question for Jermaine. How have some of those discriminatory practices impacted communities of color?
Yeah. So Jason hit it out the park on that question, because the redlining piece, really did significantly hold back, Black and brown communities from access. And I think that's something that has improved, although it's not where it should be right now, in my opinion. I think one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is one, it is that confidence issue and all of those different types of things, because when you have a vision and you're the only one that sees it, and the people that you love and care about hear that vision and they don't get it and they don't understand, they tell you not to move forward or not to do this or whatever, and you get discouraged, but it's your vision. And when you're asking advice from folks who don't have the right equipment to give you the right assessment or the right information that you need, that's what's the problem. It's not them. It's not you. It's just that you have to surround yourself with folks who have access, folks who have started a business before, or folks who are in the industry that you want to be in, so they can give you that advice of here, don't go down this lane, talk to this person who can finance you and all of that. That's what we call my mentor used to call a kitchen cabinet. You got to have your kitchen cabinet where you can talk to people and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, to help you refine it and put that idea forward. I think the redlining piece and access to capital, which was one of those things that kept coming up in this film, is something that exists still today, and just in a different way. In cities like Detroit, cities like Flint, Saginaw, and all these places, you can see a lot of folks who may have access to capital, and they're the ones who are investing. But we start looking around. It's like, well, they don't exactly look like us. What's happening? Well, it's a lot of that is because we might be shut out of that financing realm in that particular community, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the way that I think that we are now, after the last couple of years, the Buy the Block movement with like Nipsey Hussle and other artists, and the things that Jay-Z is doing, and other folks, maybe our local stars like Glenn Wilson and Essence Wilson, who are showing you that with the right team being around you, the right support being around you, the right kitchen cabinet, you can navigate that space. It's difficult, but with the right team, you can navigate that space and reach your goals and your dreams, whether there be for working for somebody, working for a great company or a great city, or being that entrepreneur that you're thinking that you might want to be.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the access to capital piece for just a second, because this ties in with what Jason said earlier, and I think Glenn mentioned it as well, like being ready and being prepared and getting out of your own way and making sure you have things in order. We talked to a number of businesses that complained about the PPP loan, about the various grants that came out to the communities related to COVID, related to some of the racial justice work that was happening. And we encountered businesses that were just not ready, that still had, receipts in the shoebox and couldn't produce the financial statements that were required. So I'm curious, from Brandy's take, are you seeing access to capital being an issue for some of the businesses you're working with, and what are some of the barriers that they're facing for accessing capital?
Yeah, that's probably the number one thing people say they need, right, is capital to start a business. And so kind of going back to ready and prepared, we're fortunate enough to work with most people when they're early in their process. So when sometimes they come to us and say, okay, I need to get a loan to do X, Y, Z. And we're like, no, not yet. Like, don't go to them yet. Like, let's get you ready. Let's kind of, go this. But that continues to be a challenge, even for those that are ready and willing. And one of the things about the PPP loan, the first time it came out, not after the adjustments were made, in response to a lot of the challenges when it was first released, that we were hearing, though, is, people who didn't actually have a relationship with their bank, that made a significant difference in those getting those supported funds. And I think it was like a little underestimated. It's like, no, I have a bank account, I have my EIN number, I have all of these things, but they didn't actually have like a real relationship with their financial institution. And unfortunately, that played a huge role in how PPP loan funds were rolled out in the first round. And luckily, it kind of got corrected and they were making it more accessible afterwards. But that was a huge difference, especially in a time when survival was imminent, like survival was on the line for a lot of businesses and organizations because the world stopped. Across the board. And so, and one other note I'd like to make, kind of just to historical structures that I think still exist, that kind of trickles into capital, access to capital, is the fact that people's perceptions of these challenges are actually based in fact. Like, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a rumor that was started. It's fact. Like, these things actually happened to Black people in America, and so I think for, organizations and, different people in different spaces working to help people move forward, that has to be a realization and an understanding. Because once you understand, okay, these people aren't hesitant about getting their money from the mattress and putting it in the bank because they think somebody's going to steal it. It's because that happened, like that really did actually happen to Black people in America. So I think there's just kind of the disconnect that, again, I think is getting better as more of us are being put into these spaces and being placed at these tables so we can give historical context to challenges. But I do think, again, while it's getting better, there's those instances that come up that people didn't even consider when rolling out supportive funds during a pandemic, is that, Black people, just, minority-owned businesses are going to miss out initially because those considerations just didn't even cross their mind. And so, and again, I don't think it was anything purposeful. I think it was just an oversight, because as much as we think we've come so far, we get reminded in certain situations that we still have a way to go. And so I do see some changes happening. I do see, I do see some, effort being put in to be more inclusive when we are talking about support. And I think that is really the change. And so again, yes, it's making sure entrepreneurs are prepared and ready when they come to the table, but it's also the resources are available, also being understanding with the lens in which they're working with people. And I do see some intentionality happening on both sides to make that work. So long answer, sorry.
No, that's really encouraging, because, although we're navigating as a society these really challenging times, with the pandemic, the fact that we're able to start to address some of those systemic barriers that existed is a really good thing. And to know that there is progress and that you're seeing it in the work that you're doing. And I think we're all seeing, that incremental change in different aspects. So that is encouraging. And so I would want to ask, or actually I'll say this real quick, because you talked about, more of us having a seat at the table. And I'm going to steal this directly from Glenn Wilson, because one of his goals when he is on a board or when he joins an advisory committee or whatever it might be is not to just, have a seat at the table. It's how can we expand the table so that more of us can be present and be in that space, because that diversity of thought and diversity of people in the room means that when we're talking about stuff like PPP, we don't miss the fact that, hey, not everybody's going to have all those financial statements. Can we have a pipeline to that particular program if there's representation by people who are well acquainted with those issues? And so I'll ask Renee this question. In the film, there was a line that said, the best place to learn about the current state of the real estate market is inside of a bank. And so subsequently, they ended up buying a bank, right? I'm not advocating for us buying a bank, but I think with the minds that we have here, we probably could do a really nice job running a bank. So I'll just put that out there just in case there's interest, right? But what did you learn, Renee, about real estate from being in the banking world?
A lot. I'll say that it was really a good experience, and I acquired a lot of knowledge going through my banking career in good real estate times when things were booming, during the collapse, and then also coming out of that period. And so really understanding, those market dynamics and the impact. I would say probably, to wrap all of this up, because I could mention a million things, probably one of the greatest lessons has been to look at a plan A, B, and C scenario for any real estate development that you're looking at doing, right? Not only understanding the market and doing all of your research and that as it relates to, market values, environmental, all of that stuff is important. But just as important is understanding what you're going to do, plan A, B, and C. If you're doing a for sale project, make sure it works as a rental project. If you're doing a rental project, make sure it works, for different renters. If you're targeting one market, analyze it targeting various markets. I would say that's probably the biggest lesson, is just don't be so focused on your vision for the project that you can't look at all the different scenarios, because we've just seen it this past year going through this pandemic. Anything could happen. And so you have to be prepared for anything, right? I guess that's what I would share coming out of the banking world and dealing with real estate. Be prepared for anything.
Yeah, if I could add to that real quick, Essence. The other thing that you learn being inside of the bank is that banks we invest in real estate through the loans that we make to real estate, right? And so when you look across the bank's portfolio of businesses, real estate is one of those. And within that business, there's a bunch of different types of real estate, right? You got office, you got housing, both affordable and market rate. You've got commercial, you got C&I, you've got downtown, you got rural, you got, so we have all of these investments, right, across the organization and across markets. And so we have this ability, somebody with a higher pay grade than I do, not me, but we have this ability to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and read the economy, right? In our portfolio, we know whose loans are what industry's loans are starting to pay late all of a sudden, right? And so we can then see, okay, maybe this segment, I'm not going to say any right now because I don't want anybody to quote me on any particular segment of real estate going bad, but maybe this segment is starting to suffer for whatever reason in the economy. So maybe we're going to pull back and not do more of those loans this year or at this time, right? Or maybe this one is paying ahead, so we want to do more in this particular real estate segment right now, right? And so being inside the bank, we have privy to that type of portfolio level information. And quite honestly, if you read the annual reports of the banks and the real estate companies, you can also get that intel, right? So knowing where to go to find the information, and back to Brandy's point and Jermaine's point, life is a team sport, business is a team sport. That kitchen cabinet, if you don't have a banker as part of that kitchen cabinet, who's going to call you when the opportunity arises for you to get access to any special programs? Right? Who are you going to call when you need capital? Right? The worst time to call your bank is when you need them. Right? The best time to call your bank is when they need you. Right? We always need deposits. So come on, bring those deposits on to the bank. Right? Yeah. So make sure in addition to your attorney and your accountant for those financial statements, that you've got a banker as part of your kitchen cabinet.
Yeah, that's great advice about having a banker. And it's not just a bank, right? And showing up and, doing your day-to-day business, right? It's about having a relationship with somebody inside of the institution that can be an advocate for you. And I just remember when we did I think it was, I don't remember, it must have been Swayze, and we had accounts at a bank. And when it came out in the news, somebody at the bank that we had been dealing with read the newspaper, saw that we were doing this development, saw what the price tag was, and we ended up, opening additional accounts and investigating and developing a different type of relationship, because now they could be an investor, they could do a construction loan. And so that came because we had the initial relationship, we had an advocate who then connected us to the right department that could help us in other aspects of the business. And I'll also say to something that Renee said about, running multiple scenarios. When you're talking about real estate, it can be all over the place. And I think it was our Coolidge development. We stopped counting at 99 scenarios. Like we could literally go back and find the spreadsheets of how we analyzed that deal so many different ways, because we had the drive and the tenacity to make sure that it was going to work. But it required us, because market conditions changed, banking interest rates changed. There were so many different things that happened. Tax code.
That's what changed.
So many different things.
Yeah.
That we had to pivot.
Yeah. No, I was just going to add on and when you're talking about the relationship with the bankers, and you're absolutely right when we were talking about PPP just earlier, is that I remember when the PPP came out, I didn't even have to call a bank. We got, I don't know, several bankers, and probably like 4 or 5 of them picked the phone and called and said, hey, I just want to let you know, I just want to make sure Communities First is able to get the PPP loan once it comes out and available. I just want to let you know it's coming out. I'm sending you an email. I want you to be one of the first ones in. And this was like from 4 or 5 banks. And it tripped me out, because when I'm hearing other people like, you know, didn't have a relationship with banks. I know people don't have relationships like that, but just because of how strong our relationship was with these bankers, I mean, they caught us so quick. I mean, it just like they knew what was happening at each moment. Oh, it should be out at this time. This should be happening. And then when the applications came out, they all emailed them to me, and I was just like, man, you know. But then I knew that other people didn't have that. So what I ended up doing was we ended up sending the emails out to other people, right, that didn't have relationships, but because I had the relationship with the banker, and I know I connected at least probably 10, maybe 15 different businesses or people with PPP loans, like instantaneously, that didn't have that access just because I was like, hey, that's our banker, but I know this person needs it, right? So it's also like the information that we receive is being okay to share it, like, and I think that's sometimes what happens inherently. That stops a lot of progress. Is like sometimes people feel comfortable with like, oh, I got that information, I have that access,
I'm gonna keep it. Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it, right?
Yeah.
Even though other people can benefit, and use it, and then it ends up becoming like like a gluttony, a glutton of information. And so, pass that out. I was so happy when those people called me back. It's like, oh, I ended up building a relationship with this credit union or this bank. That banker you hooked me up with, man, he was so cool. Thanks a lot. And and then when I saw the reports come out, I was like, wow, I can't believe, that many Black businesses did not get the PPP loan. It was ridiculous. So.
Yeah. Can I just interject really quickly on that? Because I think what you're highlighting, Glenn, is something that I think a lot of folks need to hear, which is, you having that access and then sharing that access is amazing. And it's something that a lot of folks operating in our community need to do a lot more. Because it's really important. I think, there's a saying that I heard recently. It was like a lot of people know the plug, but they don't know the socket, right? Like, and so it's the reality is the power exists in this space. And if you know your plug, then you got to know who they're plugging into, right? Who they're plugging in with. And I think that's the type of knowledge that needs to be shared more often. And I'm so glad that through your series and the work that you all are doing at Communities First, that folks get access to that information and access to that knowledge, and then they can, whatever they do with it on their own is their business. But being able to convey that is something that's important.
Absolutely. And the reality is, how is that hurtful to us, right? We already know who to contact. We've got 4 or 5 banks vying for submitting our PPP loan. How is it hurtful to us to share that information, forward the email, and provide a quick introduction between a business and that banking partner? It doesn't, right? It only helps the overall community. So I think that requires some self-reflection on like, why does it seem like some people withhold information from other people, especially when there's no harm done to them? That's a whole therapy session. So we're not gonna dig into
that whole zero sum game. If you get some, I get less, right? And I think that's a horrible mentality that happens in our community, especially when it comes to relationships and why progress is stopped, because people are so worried about, if I give you some of my social capital, if I help you to get over this hump, it's going to take something away from me because you gain something, not realizing that if that person is gaining more, that only makes your network even stronger. You know what I mean? If you help them get over the hump, you see what I'm saying? And that's and it fails a lot right there. Things fail.
Yeah. And going back to the movie again, if you think about and look around, look, we got all off the movie, right? But if you think about who Garrett had surrounded himself with, it was a whole team of folks, including his wife, right? That was like, no, don't put that couch right there, right? While that may seem minor, she was a major player in that whole deal. And there were a lot of those people surrounding him that made up his kitchen cabinet, whether it was all the time or on an as-needed basis. You're on mute, Essence.
A very valid point. And I shared Glenn's analogy earlier about the table, and let's bring more seats in. And I would say that one of my analogies would be, don't be so concerned about this pie and everybody getting their piece of a pie. If it seems like your piece is getting too small, then we need to figure out how to make a bigger pie, right? And that's really what they did. They surrounded themselves with people, but everybody was getting paid, right? They didn't try to cut somebody out and scrimp on and they made a bigger pie. They figured out how to make more money so everybody can have more money. And that's what we really need to be thinking about, and what we need to do is not think about it that our piece is getting smaller. We just need to enlarge the pot for everybody.
Well, they not only did they make a bigger pie, but they made other pies, right? First they were in real estate, then they became bankers, right? That's a whole nother pie.
And I had to laugh at the part where they were talking about having 90 days of experience. It's like, how do you just decide one day you're just gonna buy a bank? Like that, it floored me. But
I got a whole bunch. I got a whole bunch of them stories about how I decided something. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Sometimes it turns out great. Just making the decision. That's usually the hardest part, is making a decision that you're actually going to do something and then actually having the team to accomplish it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking about like learning from other people, how we share information, and one of the things that happened was in the film was playing golf, right? So you had the two main characters who are Black, who had to teach the white man who was their front how to play golf so that he could play golf with other white men. And so I want to ask the question, is there truth that a lot of business is done over golf? And then what are maybe some of those other spaces that business is happening in where people of color and women are absent? And we'll start with.
Can I just jump in real quick, because I just got a quick one, and then I'll fade to back. I had to become a community development banker because I hate golf. in my banking counterparts, bankers love golf. I can't stand golf. I think I'm too tall to be able to accurately see that tiny ball all the way on the ground. I'm just saying.
It seems like you would be able to see it better because you're okay. Never mind.
No, it's too small in this way. It's a distance thing.
So we can start with Renee. Does business really happen over golf? And then what are some of those other spaces where people of color or women have been absent where business is taking place?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I still don't know how to play golf. I've only been golfing, I think, 2 times. My first time golfing ever, I was actually pregnant. And so I really was out of place because I was a woman of color, pregnant. So I couldn't really enjoy the whole drinking and golfing thing. And but yeah, it definitely happens. And I would also say that I've noticed, and I've been privy to a lot of business dealings and conversations where those relationships are being built in places of vacation. So people have cabins, homes in Florida, and for some reason they're all, by each other. And so, I've heard a number of business conversations have happened, on either on the yacht, on the golf course, or in their vacation community.
In the country clubs.
That, yeah.
But more often than not, and this is totally accessible to everyone, breakfast meetings, right? Folks love to talk business over breakfast. And it doesn't matter what color you are, you just got to kind of enjoy something that is served at breakfast in order to show up there. But it goes, that what Renee said goes right back to those relationships. Folks that do business together have those relationships, right? They travel together. They travel and live, vacation in the same communities. But absent that accessibility, that type of accessibility, take somebody to breakfast.
I'll just add to that. The other part is bars, right? Is that is a big place where a lot of business get done. I remember somebody told me that some communities are what they consider beer communities, beer business communities. And I was like, beer business community. I was like, what does that mean? And this is a guy just telling me, he was just like, these are communities that you go to and people want to sit down and have a beer and talk to you, right? And they'll rather talk to you about business after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock over a beer to actually get something done. And so what that does is that takes out a whole segment of people that say if they don't drink or if somebody don't drink beer. I don't know if you paid attention in the movie, but they had that part where they were showing him like the different whiskeys and wines and stuff like that he was tasting, because they knew when you would go out, like I know I've been out and I'm not a drinker, but I've been out at different times and people are like drinking different scotches and tasting them like it's a whole experience. And like I'll know about what people are drinking, but even though I don't drink, but I've had to teach myself just like to know about certain things just to have conversation about it, because that's really what people want to talk about, right? They want to talk about their scotch or whatever it could be. And I think that people have to understand that it's bigger than just people just, sitting down and saying, oh, this is a great idea. That's not really what some people like want to know you as an individual and as a person. And sometimes where the disconnect happens for women and that's why I'm always trying to be intentional, or we're always trying to be intentional to make spaces for women, is because what you will find out is that like me and Jason can be like, oh yeah, we're going to the bar, right? And then it's like, oh, do you invite the woman to the bar, right? Because it's like you don't want somebody to think that, oh, you invited the woman to the bar, you got the fellas, and then your woman's upset or something like that because people are uncomfortable, right? And so people like create these things that shouldn't even be there. Like me and Jason should just be able to invite Renee to the bar and she should be able to just come and sit down and have a conversation with us. But because the way that stigmas have happened, right? So us, even as men, is we have to be intentional to make sure that we're opening up those spaces. So if somebody said, when we're in a meeting, and this has happened where me and Renee have been out, and somebody asked me like, hey man, you want to go to this restaurant? And I'm like, yeah, we'll go, and they're like, huh? I'm like, why couldn't me and Renee both go with you to this bar, right? And sit down with you and, have some, have a pizza or whatever. So I think it's like paying attention to all those things. And even as men, is just making sure that we're being intentional. And also, depending on where you want to be in life, just because you don't know something don't mean you don't have to learn it if that's where you're trying to go. So you can hate golf all you want. Like I've been on the golf course and I used to be a better player back in the day, and I haven't played in a while. But if somebody really want me to go on a golf course and it really something important, and I know this person, I'll be out there looking horrible. We're gonna have a good time, So do what you have to do to build those relationships.
Yeah, I'll allow Brandy if you'd like to answer kind of the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, spaces vary with where you go. I love the breakfast, the breakfast piece, because I feel like that's very underrated. And I love pancakes. But one of the things, just to speak specifically to women, there's also kind of that balance of women and being mothers, and then you're in this space. So as someone who runs an organization and in these spaces where it's, oh, after work, we're going to go grab drinks. It's like, well, I got till about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then I got to go get this kid, right? So, I mean, and that's unfortunately a mom challenge. Don't get me wrong, my husband does great hopping in when I need him to, but those are like those extra thoughts and things that, it'd be great for men to also consider as they are trying to create these spaces for women, is the fact that sometimes we're wearing 4 hats at the same time. And, for it to really, truly be inclusive, that does need to be taken into account. And so, I mean, there's breakfast, but then there's also the basketball court, which, a lot of business gets done. I am not going to strap up, my sneakers to go out there. But I mean, hey, I'm a good spectator. I know what's going on. I can follow the game. I can commentate. I can do all that. But, I'm not going to get out there and like play, but I'll be on the side. I'm going to be like cheering and doing the whole thing. So, but there's a lot of spaces. I think it's just a matter of, figuring out what they are and finding out what somebody likes that you're also trying to do business with. Because maybe it isn't golf, but, oh, they like to go bowling. Brandon, okay, let's go bowling. Like, let's go do this. So there's a lot of different areas that you can kind of come. Sorry, I'm seeing that chat pop up and I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah, that's Burton. That's just co-signing everything that Brandy is saying, which is her husband. And so he said he was horrible. So what we're gonna do for at least 2 weeks, we're gonna allow Brandy to go out to all the events, and then Burton is going to have to stay home for the next 2 weeks. So let's see how that works. And
we can have we can have business meetings at Chuck E. Cheese.
What's going on?
They serve pizza and they serve beer. I'm just saying.
I have not been to Chuck E. Cheese in a minute, but I did hear it's evolved. Like, my kid's only 2, so we haven't quite introduced Chuck E. Cheese yet, but I'm not opposed.
And I'll share that there are only 2 people that have the ability to cause those things to pop up on the screen, and it wasn't me. So, so Burton, it wasn't me. All right. No, but I think that's important. And sometimes it's the simple things that we don't think about. A lot of times people that are in business together, their kids may be in the same school system, right? So they see each other at different kids events and sporting events. And I think it's just, we have to make an intentional effort on our own part to make sure that we are attending like chamber events, networking events, things that can be done within the context of the workday, things that can give us access to the people that we need access to make sure that, the business deal gets done. And I think to Jason's previous point about the worst time that you need a banker, that's the same thing when it comes to a business partner or somebody that you need a letter of support from. The worst time to approach them is when you need it. The better time is to develop a rapport and a relationship with them on an ongoing basis. So it's not you only come around when you need something, right? Don't just show up at the networking event to talk to that person only because, that's when you need them. Be present, be in the space. And there are a lot of places that we may not get invited to, but there's also a lot of places that we have access to, and we don't make the time and take the opportunity. Service clubs, you've got, Rotary, you've got, the Lions, you've got a number of those, different types of clubs and organizations to be a part of, fraternities, sororities, and go into those events that are outside of your little circle, right? Go into a national conference, and things like that. So, trade clubs, so many other avenues to overcome that challenge and barrier of maybe being, school or the bar, because you may not be the person's best friend, but they can respect you in business. So I know that, there are so many more things from this film that we really could talk about. And I really want us to continue this conversation. I'm like, can we just all get together outside of outside of this event and just continue the conversation and continue the dialogue, because there's so much there. One of the things that somebody was quoted in saying about the film at the end was, he could have, and talking about Bernard, the main character, he could have functioned and operated and been successful without even thinking, what about African Americans in Texas? And so just for context, he bought the bank in his hometown, right, to help people back at home. And so the person said, but he saw a bigger picture. And I think it's just a reminder to all of us that we can make money. You can always figure out how to make money. And Bernard saw the bigger picture. So if you all could just take a moment and give us some inspiring words to encourage us in the same vein. And we'll start with Jermaine.
An inspiring word. Well, I'll just first off, since I know we're going to be wrapping up, I just want to say thank you again for having me on. This has been a great conversation, and it's always great to share space with you all. I think as far as motivation is concerned, I think a lot of folks, we all have these unique talents. And one of the things that I've learned over my years in business and in working in government space is that's what that's what I lean on, is what those natural gifts and abilities that God gave me, that I continue to try to be an expert in, right? Which means I'm reading up, I'm talking to other folks, I'm trying to shore up those skills and enhance those skills, because that's my gift that I can bring to the space, and you all have that. And so once you've identified that for yourself, make sure that you're continuing to nurture those things. And that is what provides confidence when you're in spaces, because people are going to challenge you. People are going to say no, but your vision is your vision. And that's been given to you. So just stay steady, stay focused, and continue to pursue your dreams. Don't let anybody stop you.
Yeah. Renee?
I'd like to answer that question from the thought of, so in the movie it focused on, the treasure that Bernard had to give based on, the information that he acquired, the treasure that he gained. And Jermaine kind of pointed to the point about talent that you can give back. And so, I'll focus on the other item of time. It's not just about, making money. You can also give your time. And volunteering is really an underrated way of networking and getting connected to your community, because there are a lot of ways that you can uplift and support besides making money. And so I would definitely encourage folks, regardless of where you are, I think we all have a piece of time that we can carve out to give to others.
Brandy.
Kind of piggybacking off of Jermaine's point, learning never stops. So, especially as you're starting a business, or if you're working for another organization, learning is continuous. And so, and that was the one thing that stuck out to me, was the very first scene of the movie, where you think he's simply shining shoes, but really he's taking mental notes on how to do what he wants to do, and helps get him along the way. Even though there's roadblocks and challenges and all of that, he continued his vision, and he continued to learn and evolve, and that is for all of us. I mean, just because we have these degrees or, whatever, that doesn't stop that process. And so, to me, it's about finding those different avenues where you can learn, which is where networking comes in, which is where, it's not always in the classroom. And so, and also the other point is just, we really belong in any and every space. So there's not a space that's not for us. Just because traditionally it's not for us. We can be anywhere, do anything, and have our voice be heard. And so feeling as if you don't belong isn't necessary. If you're there, you're there, and just own that and live in that.
Jason.
That is a perfect segue. Thank you, Brandy. When we get these seats at these tables, or when we get the chairs in these rooms, you can't be silent. Right? We have a voice, we have a perspective, and we have to bring that perspective in the room with us. I think that's being authentic, and that's, don't worry about this idea that you're speaking for an entire community. No, you're speaking for you, and your perspective is important. And guess what? God put you in that place at that time for a particular reason. Right? So don't waste it. And the last thing is, never self-eliminate, right? Get out of your own way. If it's something that you want to go after it. Folks who try to turn you away, it's just because they don't have the perspective to see where it is that you're going, right? What was his name? Garrett was smarter than everybody around him, so they couldn't see what he saw, right? And so there was no way that they could, that their perspective could or should assuage him or turn him back from what it was that he was looking to accomplish. So never self-eliminate. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think, another thing to keep in mind is, after the main events of this film, I think it was 1968, the Fair Housing Act passed, right? That was 3 years after all of this happened. And because they had to testify, I'm sure that some of what happened, because this film is based on a true story. I don't know if we mentioned that, but some of what happened really led to some of those conversations and the change that happened and resulted in the Fair Housing Act, along with a number of other events that were happening around the country. And so I think it's important for us to remember that when we're talking about equity, social justice, civil rights, it doesn't always look like marching and protesting. Sometimes you have to just do the work and challenge the system, and people notice. And sometimes they notice by trying to shut you down. Sometimes they notice by trying to encourage you and come alongside you. but I think there are lots of examples that we are not aware of where people did their day to day, you know what I mean, what they thought was right, what business they were in, and they led to, you know, monumental change. So it's just encouragement for all of us that you don't always have to be the person out front leading in a way that gets public recognition to really bring about change. Now, don't get me wrong, they made an impact because they had 177 buildings. It was like, you know, multiple millions of dollars. They had employees. They owned 2 banks, but they, in a sense, still did that in a low key way, right? And it resulted in some pretty substantial changes that have impacted and affected all of us. And so I'll leave Glenn with the opportunity to have final words and just give you a quick reminder that I mentioned the 3 Ps earlier. So if you can incorporate those into your concluding remarks, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, well, no, I appreciate it. It's so hard coming after all y'all because y'all all gave great answers. And it's like, I feel like anything I would say is just only really just undergirding, you know, anything that y'all are saying and supporting that. But I always say, you know, you can never be chosen if you're not in line, right? And I think sometimes what happened is we don't even want to step up and we don't want to get in line, right, to pursue, because sometimes that journey and that line looks real long. So I don't know. I mean, I don't wait in like Chick-fil-A line or Popeye's chicken, you know, those lefties, steakhouse, whatever. You know, I'm not giving them free marketing. I guess I am. But those lines get so long. But like, you're not going to get the sandwich or you're not going to get what you want if you don't get in line. You see what I'm saying? And so you have to be okay with going the journey, going through the process, you know, and then when your time is, you know, when your time is ready, when it's time that order to happen or your name is called, you know, you got to know what you need and what you want, right? And I talk about the 3 Ps of success, and I'm glad Essence brought that up. But, you know, one thing is you got to be persistent, right? And you got to be persistent to a point that you got to keep all your integrity in place, but you got to push hard. You can't stop. It's going to be times where you're going to want to give up. It's going to be times where it doesn't feel good. It's going to be times where you're just going to be like, man, why am I even pushing? Why am I even doing this? And like, that's where your persistence happens. But then but if you have passion, right, you got to be passionate about it. If you ain't passionate about what you're doing, it's not even going, it's like your passion is going to help you be persistent. You see what I'm saying? Like your passion. So sometimes like when you get into spaces that you feel like, when I say feel like if you're trying to jump in somebody else's lane, it's very hard to be passionate about somebody else's thing, right? But it's very easy to be passionate about something that you're created for, something that you know that you're supposed to be doing, because you'll always second guess yourself in a place that you're not passionate about. You see what I'm saying? So your passion is going to help you push that persistence on. And then you got to be patient, right? That's one of the hardest things to do in anything in life, is waiting on that opportunity, waiting on that moment after you're pushing, after you're passionate, and then you got to wait. And so, you know, so it's your persistence, it's your passion, and the patience. You got to have all those 3 things and they're working together. And those will create something that you will realize that as you go on, those are 3 things that you can carry with you no matter any career, no matter what you're doing. You got to push hard. And when I say push, I'm talking about to the point that, like, don't do anything that compromises your integrity while you're pushing, right? Because sometimes what happens is like we get in the way trying to make things happen. And that's what really messes up the persistence, and it gets in the way of things happening the way it's supposed to happen. So use this in your pace, and your patience helps you learn through the process. Right. And so that means that patience and that time that you're waiting, like, that's when you're supposed to be collecting the jewels. That's when you're supposed to be learning until it happens. You see what I'm saying? And then as it happens, you'll be like, man, okay, this is what all this is for. And so persistence, patience, passion, do those 3 things. And if you got those, you can make your dreams come true. But I hate to end this off. I really do. I mean, this is the 4th and final film, and I feel like I need to just do this like every month now. Like, I don't even know. Like, I feel bad for ending, but I think we ended off on a high note. And I believe this did exactly what this film series was supposed to do. We were supposed to inform people, we were supposed to educate them, and we were supposed to empower. And I know I'm leaving empowered through this whole series, and each film has built upon itself to end off in a way that has encouraged me to be even better. And I want to say thank you for the speakers and all y'all for being on the panel today, offering your feedback has been great. I also want to thank our sponsors one last time before we go. So a special thank you goes out to my community college, Community Foundation, the Greater Flint Truth, Race, Healing, and Transformation Initiative, Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, Greater Flint Art Council, NBC 25 News, Flint Institute of Arts as well. Thank you so much. We can't do this without you. Understand that communities first. We are a local community nonprofit organization, and we operate off donations. And the thing, so like Renee mentioned, get volunteer. We got volunteer opportunities for you to get involved. If you want to give, if this was impactful for you, you can give to us financially, online, and follow us on social media and share this information with other people. So y'all have a great time. And thank you so much for joining us for our African American film series. And I think you can watch the film through Sunday. Yeah, through Sunday night. So if you have not seen the film and you've seen this discussion, you can actually still go online and check out the film through tomorrow night. So thank you so much. And y'all have a good day, good weekend. Enjoy the sun.